Welcome to Fiery Discourse, your podcast or media featuring dragonesses, female dinosaurs, and other similar saurians and scalies. I'm your host, Ludmillanon, and with me are my co-hosts, Angron, Mathmachine, LuckyEevee, and Jordan. Today is our 39th episode, and we're discussing 1998's Godzilla for its 25th anniversary, so let's get things started.
Hell yeah.
Now, the idea of an American Godzilla movie, an American-made Godzilla movie that is, existed for quite a while, with numerous scripts being developed throughout the decades, including one called, I kid you not, Batman vs. Godzilla. Why we did not get that movie, I will never know, and it probably would have been made around the time of Adam West's Batman too, so that would have even been better.
I honestly want to see that.
Yep, sadly, it never got made, and this is the one that got a lot of traction in the 90s, and eventually TriStar agreed to make this movie. It was originally going to be directed by Jean de Bont, who directed Speed and Twister, amongst other movies, but then it went to Roland Emmerich, who directed Independence Day. And one thing I will say right off the bat is, I like how this movie starts. It starts with the footage of the nuclear tests in Polynesia, and we get to see a group of iguanas watch basically the nuclear mushroom clouds going off before they get nuked, and the opening credits ends in a shot of eggs left behind. If nothing else, the opening credits really sets the tone for the movie with the former patriotic music and that. And I got to say, it really does suit the tone of the movie. Now, there are some problems with the rest of the movie, but I will say this.
In a moment.
Yeah, we'll get to those in a little while. But for now, I will say, I feel like this movie gets a lot of hate where it doesn't deserve sometimes. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But yeah, the movie then cuts to the South Pacific Ocean as we get to see a fishing ship attacked by a mysterious creature. The fact that the ship and its crew are Japanese is just a cute little touch, to Godzilla's origins and that.
Yeah.
We only get a brief glimpse of Godzilla's tail in this sequence, which I do like that they do this because it's like the old Jaws method. You don't show the monster right away. You build up to it and you build up to it. And I feel like this really does work out for the best, in my opinion.
Yeah. I actually did something similar with the series that I'm doing. Like, starting out, we don't see who the person is, but it kind of gives off a sort of feeling like, what's this gonna be? Like, it gives off suspense for the most part, and unlike this movie, that one was a little more oriented towards not necessarily being a horror thing, sort of. But yeah, it's pretty much the same for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I got it. But
the Jaws thing is underrated.
Yeah,
and
I feel so too.
The monster worked out so well; they used it for all the advertising.
Yeah, they did. They famously did. They had size doesn't matter, and most of that you saw in the advertising was his eye or his foot, and it worked because, well, we'll talk more about it later. But this movie was a gigantic hit. It was in the top 10 highest-grossing movies of 1998.
Oh, dang!
Yeah. We then cut to our main protagonist called Nick Tatopoulos, who's played by Matthew Broderick. And fun fact, he's actually named after the special effects supervisor of the movie, so that's a nice touch. And it's interesting that, a guy like Matthew Broderick stars in this movie. The 90s were a time when a guy like him, who was mostly known as a character actor, Ferris Bueller, The Lion King, etc., he could star in a multi-million-dollar action blockbuster, and he didn't have to pump him with 9,000 steroids.
Yeah.
Like today with the Marvel actors, you look at them like, oh, I'm training for my role, and it's them all juiced up, and it's no, you don't have to do that. But
yeah, come on, man.
Exactly.
Take it easy.
But yeah, Nick is basically singing along to Sing in the Rain while driving to Chernobyl, and it turns out why he's there is he's analyzing the soil and the worms within it when a military helicopter arrives. They turn out to be U.S. military, and it's here where we start the running gag of people not being able to pronounce Nick's last name, and in my opinion, it's really not funny, It's not an overly complicated name, It's like if they made it, a couple more, syllables and it'd be a little funnier, but for now, it kind of just doesn't go anywhere, It kind of peters out.
Especially because he's named after the guy that designed Godzilla for this movie. That
Oh,
seems
yeah?
kind of like an insult more than anything else.
Wait, who
Yeah,
designed Godzilla for this movie?
Nick Totopoulos, that's the guy's name who designed the CGI Godzilla for this movie.
Nice.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yep. So then the movie then cuts to Tahiti, where we get to see a group of French Secret Service. They interrogate the
Magical
only
place.
survivor of the fishing boat disaster. They're led by Roche, who was played by Jean Reno, and Reno honestly gives one of the best performances of this movie because he knows what kind of movie he's in, and he really plays it to the hilt. And the
Yeah,
funny thing about
he
that,
carries
sorry,
this
go ahead.
movie.
Yeah, he definitely is. It's him, I think, and Nick. It's him, Nick, and Animal. They're the three main characters that really hold this movie together, in my opinion. And two others that we'll talk about in a little bit. And fun fact: apparently, Jean Reno had never seen nor heard of Godzilla before taking this role because kaiju movies were not that popular in France and most of Europe, sadly. Yep.
Makes
But
sense.
like I say, this moment in particular with this movie is such a good part because you can see the haunted look of the old man, with the flame being put back and forth in him, and he just stammers out, Gojira, Gojira. It really is one of the better moments of this movie. And, I do like, again, this movie isn't perfect, but I think it is a lot better than people say it is because it has parts like this that it feels like something that actually would be in a real Godzilla movie, at least stuff like this. We then get to see the U.S. military arrive in Panama, and Nick tries to find out what's going on. I do like the build-up to Nick saying about how he's a biologist in that, and then it's revealed, like it slowly pans out to reveal he's been standing in Godzilla's footprint the entire time is a good one. And then we get Nick is introduced to Elsie, his boss in the in this not interrogation, but in this basically team. And they then get to see a secret film that shows the disaster of the ship, as well as the French Secret Service interrogating the old man. And I do like the touch that we get to see the footprints of Godzilla in the ground, just to get a good idea of how big they are. And then we cut to New York City. New York City!
New York City, come on.
But yeah, we then follow Audrey, our second main character. She arrives at a news station. She tries to ask her boss if she can be a reporter. And her boss is news reporter Charlie Kamen, and he's played by Harry Shearer, who's probably best known for his many, many roles on The Simpsons. He was Mr. Burns, and he basically, the funny thing too is Charlie Kamen is basically a live action version of another one of his Simpsons roles, Kent Brockman. So they really just hired him basically to play this cartoon character he does in live action.
You can even hear it when he speaks. Like,
definitely.
You hear him talk. It's like, wait, I know this.
Yeah, it definitely seems intentional. And Charlie then basically tries hitting on her, much to her disgust. And it turns out that the power of the co-anchor has already been taken and whatnot. We then get Nick and his team arrive in Jamaica, where they discover another destroyed ship, this time with giant claw marks on them, which kind of reminds me of the Jurassic Park 3 logo, to be honest. But it probably was, coincidence, because that movie wouldn't come out for a couple of years after this. Roche turns out to be there. He's disguised as an insurance officer. And the ship turns out to be carrying cans of tuna fish that he finds on the ground. And Nick takes some of the residue off of the ship's remains. And then we get to see another Godzilla attack as we see a trio of fishing ships attacked by him. In a sequence that kind of reminds me a little bit of The Perfect Storm. Like the part in The Perfect Storm where they're going up the wave and the boat sinks under. It really does remind me of that, even though, again, this movie came out before that one. But it definitely, it seems similar in a way. And then Elsie has a theory that the creature is a dinosaur, which might be a clever reference to the fact that in some continuities, Godzilla is a dinosaur, a nuclear, a radioactive dinosaur, but a dinosaur nonetheless. But then Nick comes out with his theory. The animal is a mutant, and he's the first of a new species. And it turns out that Godzilla is slowly making their way to New York. And then we get to see Audrey meeting up with Animal, her cameraman, and Lucy, her coworker, in a diner. She laments her current situation, and Lucy basically tells her that she's too nice. And Animal, by the way, is played by the great Hank Azaria. And this year, he fought Godzilla. 1 year later, he would be Bartok fighting Ludmilla. So that's 2 years in a row where he played a guy who fought giant reptilian creatures.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, in
Yeah.
this one, he, for the most part, is the camera guy. But he
Yeah,
does
yeah.
help, so that
In a
counts.
way, yeah, in a way you could say.
Yeah.
But it's revealed that Audrey, she used to date Nick as she sees him on the diner TV. We then get probably one of the more iconic parts of this movie at the seaport. The old man goes fishing, and the other two taunt him, and it's pouring rain. And he gets a bite, and he tries to reel it in, only for it to be Godzilla himself, or themselves, as we'll find out later. But the fisherman attempts to
was
run
the
for his
trailer.
life. Yeah. But Godzilla basically rips up the dock slowly, and it's assumed that the guy dies because we don't see him make it out. And we don't get to see all of Godzilla just yet, but we do get to see like their feet and legs, which are again something that they use in the advertising a lot. And the movie also uses, I believe they reuse Godzilla's iconic roar in this part. It might be slightly pitch shift, I couldn't tell, but it definitely sounds like it is the famous Godzilla roar. And Godzilla causes boats to collapse on top of the seaport as it continues to rampage its way through. Sadly, we do not get to see him interact with Harry and Marv, who are hiding nearby. It smells like freedom. No, it's fish. But yeah, the first time we actually get to see Godzilla's head is when it bites into a truck. And I know that this Godzilla, it was designed to be a lot more reptilian than how the Japanese version looked. It makes it more feral, more like an animal compared to, the original Godzilla.
Yeah.
And some people criticize it for not being good design, but I think if you're trying to go in a completely different direction, which granted, maybe this movie shouldn't have done, but if you're trying to do a completely different take on Godzilla, this is a pretty good take on it. I feel like it reminds me of like Harryhausen and those kind of things, like those kind of dinosaurs and stuff like even like the original Lost World and things like that. I think it harkens back to those stop motion monsters more than it does the man in suit movies like Godzilla.
Yeah. Also, I will say this. I personally think that the 1998 design is pretty impressive.
Oh, the CG. Excuse me.
And I also
The
enjoy
CG
that.
is very good for 1998. I'm going to say
For
that
the
right now. It looks pretty good for 98. It's held
For
up.
the most part,
Yeah.
It's not absolutely terrible. It's noticeable, but I will admit that the creature does some pretty impressive things as a giant monster. But in any case, one thing
Apparently
that
they
I
actually-
applaud
sorry.
one
Sorry, go
thing that I applaud the MonsterVerse Godzilla for doing is taking the best of both worlds and making something that's both unique and pretty amazing, all things considered. It takes the traditional Godzilla design of yesteryear and combined it with 1998's design for the most part, making something that's both familiar and also a little more like accurate to what it ultimately is, like a giant giant kaiju, as it were. It's honestly the definitive kaiju design, all things considered. Which also brings me up to another point. I will admit that them calling back to the fact that in some continuities Godzilla is considered a dinosaur is pretty good. But in other in similar and possibly the same continuities, it's also stated that Godzilla was already like radiated, like his kind adapted to ultimately be able to absorb heat and radiation from like the sun or like volcanic stuff and whatnot, which honestly I kind of want to see more of.
I definitely can
kinda
see why.
that
Yeah.
flesh. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely can see why. Because again, this version of Godzilla, and we'll get more to that when we actually get to the attack later on, the major attack, let's say, against the military. But I definitely agree that this version of Godzilla is really kind of weak. And I've always said this. It's not a good Godzilla movie. It is a good monster movie. If you said it was a remake of like The Beast from like 50,000 Fathoms or something like that, I think you would have a better reception than if you called it Godzilla. Because with the
Yeah.
name Godzilla, you have expectations because you are trying to live up to one of the biggest, literally and physically, movie monsters out there. One of the biggest franchises. It's like if they had if someone made like a spy drama on that and they put the name James Bond on it. Even though it's a good movie, but it's not what you expect from James Bond. I feel like it's the same scenario here. It's not what the
Exactly.
audience was expecting when they see Godzilla.
Yeah.
Anyway, we then cut to two really funny characters, in my opinion. Mayor
Yeah.
Ebert and his assistant Gene. They're actually parodies of two very popular film critics at the time, Roger
Siskel and
Ebert
Ebert.
and Gene Siskel, who hated all of Roland Emmerich's other movies. They hated Independence Day. They hated Stargate. I don't think Emmerich did any other movies other than those two at the time, but apparently they were amused by their appearance in this, and they publicly questioned, why didn't you have Godzilla kill us? Which, I give him credit for that. I
Something.
give him credit for being good sports.
Yeah. I mean, I what's that line from Hannibal Lecter? The world is more interesting with them in it.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently, even though they critically salvaged the movie, they were amused enough by that. So good on them for being good sports. But anyway, anyway, I like their characters too. They have a good comedic dynamic between them. Anyway, Mayor Ebert starts giving his speech in that while Godzilla slowly approaches. He causes like earthquakes as he roars. Godzilla then starts destroying building as people run from the monster approaching, classic thing in all of the kaiju movies and that. We then cut to a Charlie Kamen complaining about how he doesn't have any good stories before Godzilla walks right past his window, which stars his secretary. And in a fun little cameo, she's played by Nancy Cartwright, who is probably best known for being Bart Simpson, the voice of Bart. And I wonder if that was intentional because you got Hank Azaria, you got Harry Shearer, and you got Nancy Cartwright. That's three pretty big Simpsons voice actors there.
Nice.
Even though this wasn't made by Fox, but maybe it was intentional. But yeah, the part with him not noticing is funny. And we then get Godzilla going past the diner that Audrey, Lucy, and Animal are in, which destroys the windows. And we then get another good sequence, in my opinion. Animal snatches up his camera and he tries chasing Godzilla. He's more concerned about getting a good shot of the monster than his own personal safety. We then get a shot that I remember was in the trailers, even as like a kid, like a little infant. I remember this part from like the TV commercials. He finally gets a good shot of Godzilla before it lowers its foot on him. However, Animal, he survives by accidentally being between Godzilla's toes, and he laughs hysterically after surviving. And I'll be honest, this scene is a good one in my opinion. It is something that, again, it's not really Godzilla, but it is a good moment. It is something that it would be in probably the more goofier Showa era movies, and like the later era Showa, I feel.
Honestly, it would probably be for the most part at home with as like a little light moment in a modern Godzilla movie, which
That
I'm
too,
kind of
it
down
could fit in
for.
there as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we get,
It's also pretty funny that oh god, what was I gonna say? I had a thought, but
it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. But yeah, we then cut to the military arriving at their base in New Jersey as they basically have to evacuate Manhattan because, there's a giant monster on the loose. It turns out that then the military loses Godzilla, which has never made sense to me. Not when I saw it for the first time, not when I've seen it for like the 50th time like this. Because, I mean, I get, cold-blooded reptile on that, maybe, but Godzilla is a, gigantic, monster. How could you lose something that huge?
Devil's advocate for this one, even though I've heard in recent years that that theropods like the Tyrannosaurus Rex and whatnot had padded feet for a more quiet approach, as it were, and also their lean makes them a little more capable of weaving through stuff and whatnot a little easier. So it's honestly down to biology on that one, which I personally believe works. Not completely, but it does work enough.
That does make sense. I have to agree with that. We then get a Charlie does a news report and it shows animals footage of Godzilla. But then Audrey notices Nick on the news footage and she tries to basically convince Charlie that she has an insider for the story. And we'll come back to this later in this admittedly kind of stupid plot point in my opinion. But we do get a really cool shot of the building with the gigantic hole in it. It's a neat image. And people are basically fleeing the city in terror because of course they would. And I like how Mayor Ebert, he's complaining about the evacuation while basically stuffing his face with candy. Gene tries to take it away, but Ebert just slaps his hand away. And again, for comedy relief, they do work. I will admit that Mayor Ebert and his assistant Gene, they are legitimately funny.
Back off, Gene.
Yeah, exactly. And I like another good part that's kind of understated is Ebert is complaining about a group of business owners all waiting to see him until Gene says, "Oh, they paid for your election fund," and then he's all like, "Oh," and then he's all business with them. That is funny, Roche approaches the mayor in his assurance officer disguise, and he plants a hidden microphone on him. Charlie tries to get to the mayor to interview him, but he doesn't have his press ID as Audrey stole it. She's planning on using it to closer to Nick and the story. We then get another pretty good comedy sequence as basically Roach and the other French agents complain about American food and American coffee. It's something that, again, it's kind of stereotypical, but it is funny. And I don't know if this is intentional. Them in their little spy van reminds me of the French movie The Tall Blonde Man with One Black Shoe, which it might be intentional, it might not, and I hope it is because that would be hilarious. But yeah, the French Secret Service agents, they're listening in on the mayor, and he's basically complaining about the evacuation being pointless. We then get another funny bit with him asking Genio, "Yo, do you know what's going on? I don't know what's going on. You never know what's going on. Oh, thank you, sir." It is, again, that funny little, back and forth between them. But then it turns out that the military goes into an abandoned subway tunnel that Godzilla previously rampaged to. And then Nick comes to the realization that Godzilla is just an animal that is hungry. Which, again, it doesn't really feel like Godzilla because Godzilla is many things. One thing he's not, I think, is just an animal, He's more than that.
Yep.
Yeah, it definitely is something that is a change. I can understand why Godzilla fans were upset this when it came out. And again, even today, because there's a lot of people who still hate this movie. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
all Godzilla's personality and character and made him just a mutated wild animal. That's not Godzilla.
Yeah, exactly. I understand where it's coming from. But again, looking at it not as a Godzilla movie, but as a monster movie, it does work in its own way. But anyway, the military then completely goes into the city while the French agents are monitoring the situation. Roach basically drinks coffee but spits it out, wondering what it is. It turns out to be French roast, and then Roach just replies, "Needs more cream," which, again, funny part. And then we get the infamous part with the military trying to lure Godzilla out with a lot of fish, which of course leads to the iconic line, "That's a lot of fish."
Brief tangent
I
for a
don't know
second.
why it's funny, but it just is. Maybe it's Matthew Broderick's understated delivery.
Yeah,
Something so obvious. But
it
yeah.
honestly. All right, quick tangent for a second. Back to
Go
the
ahead.
bit with Philippe pretty much saying more cream and whatnot. It's honestly funny that the French Secret Service would pretty much be roasting American food and whatnot. Even though, a little later, Philippe is seen eating a quote-unquote American breakfast, which shows that he pretty much somewhat warming up to American food.
Yeah.
Despite the coffee, because
Yeah,
coffee.
exactly. But yeah, getting back to the "that's a lot of fish" line, I think the real funny moment is something that not a lot of people notice. The soldier next to him gives him a look of complete bemusement, like that's what you're getting out of this. And it's something that's just so quick, and it's probably intentional, but it's such a quick little joke that it really does work. Why the scene works. But anyway,
Sergeant O'Neill, who is the most
sorry.
relatable character in this entire movie.
I can see that. Yep. But then
And that guy
Godzilla
was in several scenes, and just every time he's on, you get that feeling of, oh, what a fucking day I'm having. from him.
Yeah.
Yeah, which again, it does work. It does work. But then we get to see Godzilla as he smells the fish and he rises up. We get our first real good look at him. Which again, as we said earlier, it's an interesting design, but Toho and a lot of the original creators of Godzilla really were displeased with it. Apparently, the original suit actor of Godzilla walked out of the premiere and he said publicly that is not Godzilla. Which
He's not
ouch.
Godzilla.
Yeah, ouch. But I personally, again, as I said earlier, I feel like this movie would have worked better if it didn't have the Godzilla name on it. It feels like they had an idea for a movie about a giant monster, and they said, let's put the name Godzilla on it. Everybody likes Godzilla. But yeah, it still does work for me. But anyway, Godzilla roars in Nick's face before heading to the fish, and I do like how Nick is in complete, awe of Godzilla as the military begins firing on it. And this I just love, Godzilla ducks out of the way and the military ends up blowing the buildings behind it. And then Godzilla gets away. There's a cute gag with Nick almost getting crushed by like a statue of a scholar and that. And then we get a part that's interesting. Godzilla roars and then a fireball engulfs an army jeep. Originally, in the script, it was going to be Godzilla's atomic breath. They did not put it in the movie because apparently Roland Emmerich thought it was too unrealistic, which I don't get, Yeah, well, why remove Godzilla of one of his most iconic, weapons? They remove the atomic breath, So this is a way I think
story tall giant mutant lizard. But plasma breath, no, that's unrealistic right there.
Exactly.
My gosh.
But yeah.
Okay, honestly, though, devil's advocate on that part, to be fair, name one dinosaur that ultimately could breathe fire.
True.
One lizard that could breathe fire. But yeah, anyway,
again, he is
agree.
a giant mutant. But we then get a group of helicopters chase down Godzilla and a pretty good action sequence. The CG on Godzilla here, I remember reading the reason they had it in night and at the rain was kind of to hide and obscure it a little. Kind of like what they did with Jurassic Park in a way about 5 years earlier. And again, the CGI on Godzilla is a little noticeable, but for the most part, for 1998, there is a lot worse. I mean, Spawn alone looks 50 times worse than this movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this also came out the same year as Batman and Robin, people, so, Batman
and Robin was actually 97, but yeah, no, same time period. You're right. But yeah, I like that the helicopters miss Godzilla and destroy the Chrysler building, and then Mayor Ebert speaks for us all by basically saying, you're doing more damage than that damn lizard is. I mean, and he's right. Yeah. The mayor is right.
He's right. That's one of the few times where he's right.
Yeah, but a pair of looters are stealing like TVs and electronic equipment, a cute gag where their car is crushed by Godzilla. And then we get a really good part. Godzilla seemingly disappears and the helicopters fire on him. And the pilot says, I think we got him. And then Godzilla destroys the helicopter with a cute little fake out. He then destroys a second helicopter. He then chases the third and final one. And again, another fake out with, I think we lost him. And follows by Godzilla just eating the thing. And then we cut back to Mayor Ebert still ranting about it. And then Gene tries to give him candy to calm down, but he's so pissed he just swats it out of his hand again. Which again is a funny part.
Get out of my face.
Yeah, exactly. Then we get another scene that, for better or worse, is iconic. Godzilla, climbs on the building and lets out his iconic roar, which it looks cool, but also reminds me of more like something King Kong would do rather than Godzilla.
Yeah.
Godzilla would not
it also honestly looks like he's humping the Chrysler building.
Oh God!
Or whatever that.
Oh God!
It's like his little humping post. Like
I will never be able to unsee it. Wow. I will never be able to unsee that now. Wow. God.
I mean, he is the only one of his kind, and he does reproduce asexually. So
we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that right now. Basically, Nick goes to a pharmacy and he purchases pregnancy tests while Audrey meets up with him. And the relationship drama between Nick and Audrey is really just dull and like completely cliche. Matthew Broderick does his best with it, and again, I feel like he is probably the best actor that's taking it seriously. In other words, because you can really feel that he's giving it his all, and apparently he has no regrets of it either. Someone asked him on like a talk show if he regretted doing Godzilla, and he said nope, he had fun with it. So more power to him.
Nice.
But yeah, it turns out that Nick's job is to collect information about nuclear contamination and new creatures. And then we get the big reveal, which Math just said. Godzilla turns out to be pregnant and can change their sex so they can reproduce asexually. This is the only reason. Yeah, we are covering this movie, by the way. And hey, I'm happy we get to talk about it, so it works.
Wait, which movie? Which movie did you say again?
This movie.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Godzilla 98. But yeah, Godzilla is in New York to nest, and Nick realizes that lizards can lay many, many eggs at once, which would mean very bad things. And then Audrey steals the tape that contains the secret information of the old man and Godzilla's footprints and whatnot. And one thing I don't get, the tape literally has the words top secret written on it in tape. It's like, you couldn't make it a little more subtle, you know? It's like, oh, that's the secret tape because it says secret tape on it.
It was just missing, please no stealsies.
But yeah, there's a good sequence where the army goes in the tunnel and they see nothing, but Godzilla's eye is like peering at them in there, which, again, is a really good moment. And then Audrey does a report on the information. She watches the copy, and she's happy about it. It's like that's one thing that I really do not get about this movie. Like, she's more concerned about her damn story than the widespread death and destruction that this atomic, nuclear beast has caused.
Yeah, quote unquote atomic, because
but still, basically this giant nuclear mutant is not as important as her getting to be an anchor woman. Which, get your priorities straight, lady. You know.
God damn it, woman.
Yeah, but she sneaks the tape off to Charlie and his cameraman, and the French turns out to be spying on the military as they're making their next move. Nick tells them about Godzilla's pregnancy and basically warns them that they have to find the eggs before, taking care of Godzilla. The running gag with his name does have a cute payoff where not even the French can pronounce it, which is a cute little payoff, I will admit. It was a long walk to a very short joke, but I think the end result was just cute enough. We then get to see a news doing a special report on Godzilla with Charlie as the anchorman using the footage. And again, Audrey is more upset about her footage being stolen than anything about Godzilla. Yeah,
or freaking Nick.
Or Nick, that his job is jeopardized now because he's kicked off the force because they say that insider Nick Totopoulos gave us this footage and he didn't. She stole it. And in this sequence, we also get why the name is Godzilla. It's because Charlie Kamen mispronounced Gojira as Godzilla, which I don't know how to feel about that. That's how Godzilla gets his name. That is a very unusual thing. I think they should have either stuck with the creature being called Godzilla normally, or have them all call him Gojira, not Godzilla, because it definitely is a weird way to actually name your monster. One of the, again, most iconic movie monsters to ever have existed. But Nick is then kicked off the force because of the news footage. The French are also planning on leaving as Nick tries to warn the military to get the nest. And then we get Audrey attempting to apologize to Nick, and Nick is rightfully pissed off at this because, not only did she, get him kicked off of this thing, she's potentially doomed the entire city of New York and the world. And Audrey does this big over-the-top speech about how she's being a failure and how she wanted to make it big and stuff like that. And it really just does not work for me. Like I say, this is the worst part of the movie, is the human drama element.
Yeah, human drama element.
It entirely. I feel like you probably could have actually cut the character of Audrey out entirely, like the female love interest, and the movie would work a lot better. But they needed a love interest, so I guess that's why I did it.
There is one slight redeeming thing that she does later. We'll get to that when we cross to it. But this does not help the human drama in any way, shape, or form.
Not at all. Not at all.
For those that don't remember, this movie is about 2 hours, 15 minutes long, and boy, does it drag, and it's all because of this human drama stuff.
Yes, exactly.
45 minutes of the film, it would have been so much better paced. There would have been none of this shit.
Exactly. You are exactly right, Matt. That is exactly how I feel about it as well. That You could get this movie probably to a good 100 minutes, 90 minutes clip if you just took out all this stuff and all this stuff about her wanting to be a reporter and that, and it wouldn't change the film any. That is the crazy thing. But it turns out that Nick's cab driver, he wants to go to the airport, but it drives him to another area. It turns out his cab driver is Roche, as he probably introduces himself. It turns out that the reason that the French have interest in Godzilla, because it turns out that French nuclear testing in French Polynesia created Godzilla in the first place, which means that Godzilla is not Japanese, he's not American. In this continuity, Godzilla is French.
The French.
I mean, it is a way. I feel like that's a way that you could update it and have it work, because the French did do a hell of a lot of nuclear tests in the 60s in Polynesia, and they did it for decades and decades. So yeah, it is a way that if you weren't going to have Godzilla be done by the A bomb on Japan and that, I feel like that is probably the best update you could do it with. But Roach basically tells them that the Americans have given up their search for Godzilla's eggs, and Roach basically trusts Nick because he's the only one who cares about finding the nest, and they decide to work together. It turns out that Animal, for some reason, managed to get to them and is snooping on them, which I don't get how he got there, There's nothing showing how Animal... Yeah.
He was on the road, he saw that, hey, what the hell, man?
Yeah, I guess.
Absolute bro moment for him, but I do understand how that can be a little out of left field.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Animal basically runs home as Lucy tells him off for telling Audrey to be more impulsive, even though it was Lucy who told Audrey to be more impulsive, and she's basically crying over the news footage and that, and Animal tells Audrey what's going on as they try to break the story in that. Meanwhile, the French disguise themselves as American soldiers with chewing gums and really just hilarious fake American accents. It's like, yes, I am American.
No, they go a step further, and
they do like Elvis. Jean Reno, Roach even says, where'd you get it? Elvis Presley, he was the king. It's like, okay, yeah, I really am believing that the French Secret Service spend their time watching Blue Hawaii and Girls, Girls, Girls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also choking on your own vomit, but we'll get to that. Never.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Godzilla then, Audrey and Animal sneak into the subway tunnels as Nick and the French arrive at the same time. Godzilla then enters the tunnel as they flee, with Animal not running at first as he's trying to film Godzilla. And we then get the army, who apparently did not learn that insanity is doing the same thing over and over. They tried luring Godzilla with more fish, but it senses a trap and it just runs to the city, causing even more damage. And the part where Godzilla basically does a flying leap into the water, it reminds me of something from an original Godzilla movie, to be honest.
Yeah,
definitely, because which one was it? Was it Ebert, I think, where Godzilla jumps into the ocean like that? I don't know if it's an intentional reference or not, but if it was, that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I hear flying kick and Godzilla and think about one scene where he's completely flat up in the air, just flying.
Godzilla versus Megalon, the kick, the tail kick. That is hilarious. Yeah. That is one of the most iconic moments of him. But yeah, basically, a group of submarines go after Godzilla, but one of them is torpedoed by the other one. And then the remaining submarine seemingly kills Godzilla with torpedoes as the mayor and the military then celebrate. Meanwhile, we get to see Nick and Roach made it to Madison Square Garden with Animal and Audrey slowly behind. There's a really cute blink and you miss it gag where they enter in, you see a fish in a basketball hoop. It's something that's in the foreground for maybe a second, but I actually just caught it on this viewing. I was like, that's a cute little gag right there. But anyway, they find a truly ginormous amount of eggs that are seemingly endless, and the French agents prepare to detonate it and blow it up, but the eggs hatch, revealing basically hatchling versions of Godzilla that smell the fish and the humans. Now, the hatchling Godzilla, or baby Godzillas, they're kind of rip-offs of the Velociraptors from Jurassic Park, but I still kind of like them. I feel like, if
they're
you're
pretty
gonna steal,
cute.
you steal from the best, And Yeah, 2 of the French agents are killed by them while Audrey and Animal make it to a side door. There's another gag where Nick goes, "Whoa, this is where the Knicks shower," which is I guess a cute attempt at a joke anyway. But a Godzilla hatchling tries smashing its way through the door. And meanwhile, everyone is basically demanding to be let back into the city while Elsie tries telling them about the nest and that what if Nick was right. And now the Colonel listens and makes him search the city, which Mayor Ebert is absolutely furious about. Nick tries to contact the military to blow up the building, but their lines are busy. He gets like a answering machine. Audrey and Animal then get out of the locker room by going through the air vents. Sadly, we do not get to see John McClane going the other way. Although Die Hard versus Godzilla also probably should have happened.
Awesome. Coming to you this Christmas. Never.
Yeah, that would have been way better. But yeah, the 2 remaining French Secret Service agents, they get killed by the hatchlings. Nick is then cornered by them, but he backs into an elevator, and in a pretty badass moment, he actually manages to kick one out while it tries ripping its way through. Another good comedy moment happens when the elevator stops at the next floor and it's swarming with them, and he just says, "Wrong floor," and he closes the door again. It's again again, if it's not Matthew Broderick, who's an actor that has so much charisma and so much charm in anything he's ever been in my opinion, I feel like he is an actor that can make this stuff work and make it work well. But Roach and Nick meet up again just as Animal and Audrey fall out of the vent. Roach then smashes Animal's camera and threatens to shoot him while he complains, which of course he would. But Audrey then knows how they can get a message out as they run to the broadcast room. Animal tries snatching up the tape, but it's trampled by the baby Godzillas. And it turns out that the news station apparently broadcasts like the basketball and hockey games, so they have a direct link to the news station by the internet with high-tech computers. I just love like the 1990s, like the late 90s giant like desktop computers. But Animal tries typing in the code to get into the room while Roach just shoots the lock. They then have to get to a live broadcast to get the message out. The station manager then laughs it off until Animal shows him all of the Godzilla hatchlings. And we get to see the live broadcast, which, again, is another pretty good moment. We find out that there's literally over 200 Godzillas. They're all born pregnant, so they can basically endlessly reproduce one after another and basically swarm the entire Earth and become the dominant species. And the military have to bomb the stadium before all the Godzillas invade the city, and they agree. And sadly, this was not an alternate ending to Turning Red, with them bombing a stadium, but regardless.
Wow.
Yeah, just making jokes. But yeah, they have 6 minutes to abandon the building, and the chase sequence with the Godzillas running after them is a good way to build tension with like the stuff like Nick like using the basketballs, like the gumballs to cause him to trip. It's a little silly, but it does work. They then have to make their way out of the lobby, which is filled with all the Godzillas. And fun fact, a lot of them in this sequence were puppets. They were not CGI. Some of them were actually like practical effects. I believe Godzilla, in some shots of this movie, it's very hard for me to tell. Some shots of this movie, they use a giant animatronic practical Godzilla. Now, it's hard to tell because, again, the night effects in that, but that is good that they did try to do it somewhat practical. And Roach then basically shoots down the hanging lamps as they make it out with only seconds to spare before the stadium's destroyed, which kills all of the baby Godzillas. And this, again, is one of my favorite moments of the movie. Another one is I love how they do this fake out. They all like look up. There's like big ending music swelling up, and you think, oh, the movie's over. And then Godzilla shows up, and they are pissed because their children are dead. And like I say, I really love that misdirection that, oh, they killed the baby Godzillas, they killed Godzilla, movie's over. Nope, they're still there. But yeah, they run from Godzilla with Audrey tripping and being rescued by Nick, and something that reminds me a lot like the slasher movies where like they're running away from Jason and one of them always trips and falls or something. But yeah, Godzilla in this part does look pretty good. Again, like the lighting on them and the effects in general. This is probably the best they look in the movie, the best sequence, and they saved the best for last. We then get an attack as they drive away from Godzilla with a brief comedy sequence of Audrey and Animal arguing over what bridge to take, and it's not really that funny. It's kind of just, I guess, filler. The cab then turns around and Nick rips out the taxi cab info to the military. And of course, this is how they find out that Godzilla is alive and they plan on killing it once and for all. There's another part where Godzilla roars and a fireball emerges in this chase sequence, which again probably was meant to be the atomic breath before they toned it down. Yep. The taxi cab is then trapped in a tunnel as the military tells them to try to get Godzilla trapped in a suspension bridge. They then manage to make it away from Godzilla by using the headlights to, I think, disorient and drive out. They then make it to the Brooklyn Bridge, but Godzilla rises up and traps the car in its mouth. And then this part is pretty silly. Nick gets a wire. He sticks it in Godzilla's mouth and electrocutes it, which really for Godzilla, this version is really, really weak compared to the more traditional Godzillas. Because that's enough to really take it out. It continues to chase the taxi cab before it's trapped in the wires of the bridge, and it basically is killed by the military using missiles on it, which, if you know Godzilla, the real Godzilla, missiles do nothing to stop him.
Yeah,
it really pisses him off.
Very, 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 very few things stop the actual Godzilla.
Yeah.
Asphyxiation, cold, the hydrogen diffuser,
the
oxygen destroyer. Yeah, basically, you can't do much to Godzilla, other than very specific circumstances that even the military can't exactly do. Like laser cannons don't 100% do jack shit. Missiles, again, suck. Tanks are equally as sucky against Godzilla. Like this right here, despite being admittedly different, and honestly, I don't mind it being 100% different. It's still, I do agree that this is not Godzilla. Godzilla is a lot more tankier than this, and this right here, despite it being a pretty intense and epic moment and being a wholesome moment for the most part, we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah,
it's still very much not Godzilla, which honestly I do agree with your earlier statement of this should have been like a remake of like the Beast of 20,000 Fathoms or 20,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But like I said, also apparently Toho agrees because this version of Godzilla made an appearance in Godzilla Final Wars and was instantly killed by the real one. Instantly. Yeah. And apparently, though, one interesting thing is that Godzilla is not the one from this movie. It's one from that species, but it's not this Godzilla. I don't know, it's some weird Toho canonic rule things or what, but yeah. The shot of Nick just basically staring at Godzilla as they slowly die is a really good one. It's an impactful one. It feels like something, it reminds me of a little bit, and it probably wasn't intentional, but if it was, that would have been a nice touch. Godzilla 1985, where Raymond Burr watches as Godzilla falls into the volcano and dies, and he gives that speech. It kind of reminds me of that moment. Sadly, this movie did not get Raymond Burr to make a cameo. I really wish they would have in some respect.
Yeah, and also, like that movie, I don't 100% think like that is a canon death of Godzilla.
This one is canonically dead. Like the one from this universe is dead. But Mayor Ebert decides to use the death for his political campaign, which of course he would, and Gene finally grows a spine as he gives him a thumbs down and quits. Audrey quits as Charlie's assistant as she and Nick walk off. Animal tries to retrieve his tape, but it turns out it's been removed by Roach, who plans on giving it back after he takes out a few things, meaning that the French Secret Service are obviously going to edit it to remove anything of them. And then the movie ends in the remains of the stadium as we see one egg is still intact as it hatches. which would actually lead up to the Godzilla animated series that was based on this movie, which a lot of people say is way better than the movie. I have not seen it.
I have
Apparently,
not
they
seen it
actually got
either.
a couple of the cast. They got a couple of the cast members to reprise their role, which is a nice touch.
Nice.
And yeah,
I've seen it. I can confirm it is really good.
I need to see this then.
Yeah, I gotta check it out too. I'm sure it's on online somewhere, but I definitely try to see it. But
I can help find it.
although this movie got completely critically savaged, and critics hated it, they tore it to shreds. This movie was, as I said earlier, a gigantic box office hit. I think it was beat out by like Armageddon, maybe, and some other movies, but it still made it into the top 10, maybe top 5 of 1998. It actually had a sequel planned that would have had the baby Godzilla. It would have also, I kid you not, somehow incorporated Mothra and King Ghidorah. I don't know how the hell you would have adapted them into this universe. That how would you have been able to begin with it? Especially with Ghidorah, with space in that.
I'm sure there's something IRL for like Mothra that you could possibly do, like maybe involve it with Mount Everest and freaking Tibet or whatnot. So there could be something there. A Mothra you could also incorporate freaking Buddhist stuff into it, because Japan has notoriously accepted a few Buddhist ideals in the past, as it were. As for Ghidorah, he's an alien, so alien origin, honestly. That could very well... Those are two ideas that I feel could definitely incorporate Mothra and King Ghidorah, but we'll never know, since,
because they did not make a movie on this, and it wouldn't be until 2014 that we got another Americanized Godzilla and started the whole MonsterVerse, which this movie has nothing to do with. And despite the fact that this movie had a bad reputation when it came out, I feel like as the years go by, it's became more of a cult classic, and I definitely like it. I have to admit, I've seen it like dozens of times on DVD. I have it. It's one of the original prints, and I always enjoy it. It's a fun time. It's like if you want something just to watch, to turn off your brain and enjoy, a monster movie, this is not a bad choice. There are way worse giant monster movies you could pick.
Absolutely. And although I will say that even though I stick up for this movie, flaws and all, the human drama and all, I still feel that until I have yet to see 2014's Godzilla and Godzilla vs. Kong, but until I see those movies and those movies ultimately dissuade me, I will ultimately say that those are the better compared to Godzilla 98. I still need to see the series. I still need to see it all to ultimately get a better idea, but that, like I said, the new 24 MonsterVerse Godzilla is pretty much the ideal Godzilla that honestly is pretty fitting for people outside of Japan.
Yeah. And apparently, one other thing I found out while doing research on this, we'll get to the question of the week in just a second, but apparently in some countries like Hungary and Poland, this is the Godzilla that they know and love. This movie were huge hit in Eastern Europe, because apparently kaiju movies never made it over there at all. So this was something completely new to them, to the point where when 2014 Godzilla, there were complaints about it not being like this. It boggles the mind,
Yeah, well, congratulations, Eastern Europe. It only gets better.
Yep, but now it's time for the question of the week. And this week is going to be, what is a bad movie, or a movie that is considered bad, that you personally really enjoy? As for me, I'm going to say it's 2002's The Time Machine, which it didn't do good at the box office and got critically reviled when it came out, sadly, but I don't know, something about it I really do enjoy. The 1960 Time Machine is a classic, but there's part of it, like the effects, that really have not aged all that well. And I feel like with this, how they did the Morlocks were a lot more interesting than in the 1960 version, where they're just like, oh, they're giant monsters, Here, they're more like, they are like that, but they also have the Uber Morlock that controls them, and basically actually gives some, characterization to the race as a whole. And also, you have the character Vox, the basically holographic librarian played by Orlando Jones, a really underrated actor. I really like that aspect too. The part where in the original Time Machine, he goes to the library and finds it bombed out and that. But yeah, it turns out in this version, Vox is still running, but all of the actual books is destroyed. And we get a really poignant moment where the character basically says about the Eloi, he says, like, they don't know their past, they have no future. Oh, they are lucky. And the time traveler, who has a name in this version, Alexander, goes up to him and says, lucky? And then Vox looks at him and says, can you imagine what it's like to remember everything? I remember the last book I ever checked out. I remember a girl 16,000 years ago who recommended a book on dinosaurs. And I remember you. Time travel, practical application. But like I say, stuff like that. I feel like it's a way that they updated the story of the Time Machine, and they actually did a really good version of it. The effects are good, the acting is good, the score is beautiful, and as a whole, I think that it's a movie that no one ever really talks about, and it's such a shame because it really is such a good movie. I believe Guy Pearce plays the time traveler, and he does a good job, and the movie as a whole is one that I recommend everybody check out at least once and form your own opinion because it is a good movie in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think I have maybe an older version of the Time Machine. I can't remember what, but I have it in my
The
room.
1960 version with George Powell probably. Also,
Yep.
fun fact, Alan Young is the only actor to be in the 1960 version and the 2002 version. But yeah, they're both good movies, and the 1960 version is probably the better movie overall. But I really also enjoy the 2002 version. And Angron, what would you have to say? Is a movie that is considered bad by a lot of people, but you personally really enjoy?
Oh, that's a tough one. Because on the one hand, I would absolutely say Captain Marvel, because I think I'm one of the few people who didn't think Carol Danvers, despite acting and looking like it, wasn't as bland as people let on. Because for all intents and purposes, Captain Marvel has always been one of DC's ace characters, all things considered. Like, there are a few moments that disprove that, but here, Carol Danvers, despite ultimately, despite starting off a little rocky and being a little odd, Carol here is pretty much at peak overpower. It honestly has more clever moments than you'd think. Like, especially during like the final fake out. Honestly, it's in character. Like, she has nothing left to prove anymore. So she basically just like blasts him in the face because screw you, I got superpowers, I ain't conforming to shit. But, however, that is not the movie I'm going to be choosing. Instead, I have indeed heard a lot of bad things about Rock Dog. However, those came after I watched Rock Dog. And Rock Dog, for all intents and purposes, I like it. I like the animation, the music. You know how some people say that the music in Blues Bros 2000 is the best thing in the movie? Well,
and
Rock
it
Dog
is.
has that effect here. And the characters are fun. I like Bodhi's development here. I do. There are a lot of weak moments, but yeah, I honestly do like this movie because this movie is charming. It's honestly harmless for the most part, and I do not regret seeing it. So definitely give it a single watch. It's got freaking Sam Elliott. What was it? It was the same guy who did freaking he's the same guy who did Tenzin and Omni-Man.
J.K. Simmons?
Yeah, J.K. Simmons. That's who it was. I knew his name started with a J.K., but I immediately went to Rowling with that, so it was a little, But yeah, I do admit that this movie has flaws, but I don't care, and I honestly like this movie.
Those are very, very good options. Math, what would you have to say?
As the animation guy, I can go so many different directions with this. I could go something basically unknown like Animal Olympics. But that one's
Animal
too
Olympics is
easy.
not terrible. Come on, man.
That's a good
Try
movie.
harder.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying how the public has received it. That's
Oh,
what this
right,
question.
right, yeah.
That's
I could
fair, I
go
guess.
something a bit more eclectic, like We're Back, a Dinosaur Story, but I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
Very soon, very soon.
I could go something like some major bomb, like Treasure Planet or Atlantis, but those are generally well received. So the one I'm going to go with is actually a bomb that has been poorly received, and this is a bomb so bad it destroyed its animation studio. Titan
Oh,
AE.
Oh,
wait, what?
Titan AE.
oh yes,
Oh,
Don
Last
Bluth.
film
I
Don
Don
honestly
Bluth
thought,
Bluth's
made.
last movie.
yeah, I was gonna say that actually. Like Titan AE,
I
yeah,
still do not understand why this movie is as disliked as it is. It is
I
so.
agree.
I guess it's because people just do not expect this kind of atmosphere and attitude from an animated movie. It is so good, and it knows exactly what it wants to be, and is that. It's got the worst, cheesiest '90s and early 2000s butt rock you'll ever hear in an animated movie,
Yeah, for
and
the most
it fits
part.
perfectly with that.
It
Yeah,
It's
it
also
got this
has
really
some.
does.
dystopian sort of style to it, and attitude, and the characters perfectly play into that. The animation is beautiful. It's Don Bluth. This had some of the best CG and hand-drawn integration ever seen.
Yeah, and Bluth was actually forced to do the to put it in the CGI. Believe it or not, he did not want to do it.
Yep. And he
Yeah.
did so well. Like, this
He
predated
did.
Treasure Planet by 2 years, and it did the integration in some aspects better than even Treasure Planet did.
Interesting. Yeah, I really do like what they did with that. Like they utilized common trash and made it look so impressive, you know?
Plus, it has Stith, who is a fantastic character
Yes.
in a lot of ways.
Yes. Yes,
Yep.
very much so.
Yeah.
She's awesome. And she really needs more love, especially
Oh,
nowadays.
100%, 100%. Jordan, what would you have to say? Would be your answer to this?
Oh, my probably worst movie animated would probably be. It's been hated a lot, like Godzilla a little bit. It's gonna be the Black Cauldron.
Oh,
Mm.
yes. Disney still has a strange relationship with it because they infamously did not release that movie until they released literally every other single movie they had on VHS, I believe, and DVD.
Mhm.
It always is like the one they try to bury, like completely do not talk about this kind of thing, while
Yeah,
still giving it official
but
releases. Let's do it that way.
but even though it's a shitty. The story is good because they got the story from different books of the Black Cauldron, and the artwork is beautifully done. Some of the characters that don't need to be in there, like the dumb princess, doesn't need to be in that whole point. Like, why are you here? You are completely useless to the main character. Aaron himself is a good character. Gurgi, star of the show, beautifully done.
Yeah,
Yeah, the witches.
The Black Horn
they're
King.
great.
Oh my God,
He is the most
nightmare fuel.
he is the most probably scariest Disney villain since Chernabog.
Yeah, he also
and
he's also a lich, fun fact, which
Yep.
yes.
Probably one of the first
but
ones
when
in
you
the
see him,
In media, yeah.
Yep.
you just get that intent. Like, you see these characters that the minion that the Horn King followers have. You see him, you feel the music, you feel like when he comes in, he sits and he just talks. You just get goose. You're right in that area of the Horn King's presence, and you're just like. And I wish they would done more. And the guy you guys have brought him up, the guy who drew all the stuff, I can't remember what his name was. The guy who did Land for Time artwork. He has
John
done
Bluth.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he has done a beautiful job with the artwork, like the background. Everything is just beautifully done. The dark scenery, all of that is just gorgeously done. Yes, they killed this movie, but it's just when you see the title of like they talk about the Black Cauldron, this cursed thing, you're just like, I want more. I want more details. Give me OD more stories of this cursed cauldron. That once
Yeah,
you put
exactly.
something in it, it's just like you're done. That's it. You can't come back unless you have a Hail Mary thing, a person who's more powerful in sorcery to bring someone back to life like the witches did. But it's just all perfectly done. I'm like, this movie could have been a whole lot better. I wish
Mm.
maybe Disney could hear prayers. Maybe they could bring this movie from the dark depths of the cauldron itself and make it better. I know that in
Yep.
Japan they have done a horror thing attraction.
Ooh,
I can't
nice.
remember where they did, and it's in the Japanese Disney villain thing. You walk in, and they talk about like, oh, a hero's gonna come out of nowhere and stop the Horn King and all these villains from keeping you in this darkness. And then when you get to the bottom of the end of the attraction, a staff member chose someone from the audience and everything goes dark. You see the Horn King, an animatronic of the Horn King, looming over with the black cauldron right there on the side. He calls out about darkness and whatever. Again, the staff picks out someone else, and they have a magic sword. I think that was used in the movie of the Black Cauldron, and it destroys
Mm.
all the villains, and you're all free.
Oh,
I'm
oh
like,
yeah.
Yep,
that's creepy and scary. Why can't we have this in other areas?
I know, I
But
know.
yeah,
It really is a
I
shame.
picked the Black Cauldron that needs a little bit more love.
Yep, I definitely can see it. And Lucky Evie, what would you have to say?
I don't really think I've seen any bad movies, aside from maybe the Horton Hears Her movie.
So would that be the one you pick, in other words, or?
I guess I don't really remember anything about it. I don't even know what it's scored.
It's all right. It's all right. So, all right, now it is time for the patent pending Dragoness Scale, where we rank them. We're going to rank Godzilla 1998 as TriStar version. I see this is going to be difficult because, on one hand, it's not Godzilla. It's clearly not Godzilla. It is trying. It's trying to be Godzilla, and it's not really doing a job at it. But on the other hand, it's not a terrible design. And for a movie monster, if we're just looking at it from like a movie monster perspective, it has a good design. It has, it's basically an animal, but it does have some good moments. The part where it finds out that its children are dead and it nuzzles one of them is a good part. And I don't know, it feels like it's such a paradox. I have to give it. I can't give it any higher than a 7 out of 10, though. Because of that, because again, it's not Godzilla. It definitely is not. It's the furthest thing away from Godzilla. But if we just take it in a vacuum, in like a universe where any other Godzilla has never existed in the history of cinema, that just this monster, it exists. I would say it is a pretty decent design, all things considered. It is a decent, basic successor to say the work of Harryhausen, like again, as we mentioned, the Beast in 20,000 Fathoms. So,
Yeah.
Angron?
Okay. Ugh. I am going to have to give this a 7 out of 10. It's definitely pretty good, and if I was a lot younger and if I was basing this off the cartoon, which I have not seen, I would probably rank it a bit higher because it looks cool. And hot take here, some of the early designs of Godzilla from like the 1900s and whatnot before this, not my cup of tea. They weren't terrible, but I did not actually like any of them to a massive extent. They weren't bad. They were pretty cool, but you could do better, Godzilla is good, but it can be better. And this, I feel, came close, but nowadays with the 2014 Godzilla and whatnot, I feel like this is fairly good. It's not special. It's not exactly, again, Godzilla. But like, again, ranking it in a vacuum, it's pretty good. Yeah, again, it's not Godzilla, but it's pretty neat. And honestly, I do feel for this creature a lot. It's just trying to survive, and then people are all just like, "Ah!"
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly,
Like freaking-
exactly. I get where you're coming from.
Oh man, but yeah, I will ultimately. But yeah, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 for that reason.
Okay, that's good. Math?
Not my Godzilla. Moving on.
Yep.
I am going to be incredibly generous, and I'm going to do the best I can to separate Zilla from Godzilla. I'm giving it a
Oh.
6.
Okay.
The design for its day, the CG more for its day was good. The issue is today it has that sort of PS1 effect if you've been on a PS4. It's one of those things that you look back and go, yeah, it was probably technically impressive for its day. How are you not blind?
Yeah, I definitely can see where you're coming from. You know, with all the advances in technology, I mean, hell, look, just a couple years later, we got like the Lord of the Rings, which blew all this stuff completely out of the
Mhm.
water.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah,
and also Bartok the
So, yeah.
Magnificent.
I
Yeah.
get how this was good for its day. It just does not hold up. And you don't really get any kind of personality like you do from actual Godzilla, except for a few exceptions. The seeing the Zilla's children dead and then getting royally pissed off.
Oh,
That's the
hell
one
yeah.
exception. That's like the
Mhm.
one thing I latch onto is any sort of personality for this thing. It just this was basically just once again giant monster. Uh, there's nothing really there, and it's it,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I'm actually not too fond of the design overall myself. It's too agile, it's too nimble, it's too lanky. When I see giant hulking monster, I do like more like Chonkzilla like we have now, where
Yeah,
it's big,
Chonkzilla.
lumbering, it's
Big,
brutish.
big chunk. Yeah, like I said, he combines the best aspects of like the old Godzilla with some of the modern touches from Godzilla '98. I will say that. But yeah, not my Godzilla. Not
I
my
can definitely see
Godzilla.
why. Yep. So, Jordan, what would your ranking be?
I'm gonna be I like the story. I'm gonna give it 6 out of 10
Yep.
because after I did not even know that when Godzilla roared and we're supposed to get the atomic breath, I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that until you pointed. I'm like, wow, I am stupid. I didn't even notice
It's all
because
good.
then
No,
when I
it's all
looked
good.
at
It's all
her,
good.
I'm like, wait a minute. I knew all Godzillas. Why is this one not like the spike should be turning blue? Because yeah, it's gonna do its breath attack, and I'm like, wait a minute. Wow, Jordan, you are down. You have not even noticed that until now. So I like her design, but it looks like a giant iguana on its back legs. I'm like, that's not Godzilla.
It
That
looked
is
kind of
not.
like a edgy T-Rex, honestly.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly, exactly. Definitely seems
Yeah,
like they
so when
took
I'm
more
looking.
inspiration from like Jurassic Park.
Yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
looking at her like, wow, you guys just literally killed what she looks like because I mean, even the roar, I kind of like the roar. It's so much different from the original Godzilla's roar, and I like how it sounds a little bit. But I just be like, wow, we just killed this. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
give her 6 out of 10.
All good.
I
And
like the
Lucky
story of
Evie.
how they
Oops,
did these
sorry.
characters. Are you good?
I guess 5 out of 10.
Okay. Any particular reason for that ranking?
Oh, it's Godzilla.
It's not
It's
Godzilla.
not,
No.
but it's not, but it for what
It's
it is, it's good. I
also
think
Godzilla.
in a
Yeah.
way, technically it is. You are technically correct, the best kind of correct. But anyway, if you have any questions or if you want to send us your pronunciation of Nick Totopoulos, you can email us at fiorydiscourse@outlook.com or visit us on Twitter at twitter.com/fiorydiscourse. Next time, we'll be talking about the 2014 movie Tom and Jerry, The Lost Dragon. Until then,
Hey.
take care and happy Halloween.
Yep. Laters.
Bye.
Peace out.
Adios.